Hello, Assalamu alaikum. Boy, are you in store for an exciting podcast. It's all about Imam Hussain, his virtues, his morals and traits, and especially the legacy that he's left behind. Now, I'm going to be totally honest with you here. I'm not worthy. I'm not worthy to speak about this man. But I'm curious, and I want to continuously learn about him, especially the legacy that he's left and that has affected Muslims and non-Muslims alike. And I got this exact opportunity when I got to sit down with Father Christopher, a researcher and author, who's basically opened up and revealed how he felt about Imam Hussain. Now, I've already said too much. I'd like for you to watch. So please stay tuned for the episode.
For the whole of Karbala is primarily for me a lesson in human integrity. And I talk about, humans who have submitted themselves to God but have not lost their humanity for that. I think there's one particular moment where even Al-Hussein expresses utter shock and disbelief in human depravity. And that's the moment when they were threatening to burn the tents. We decide there is a better way, as did Al-Hussein. There is a better way of living, not this way, not the Yazidi model,
Yes.
the Husseini model.
Father Christopher Clohessy, aka Paul.
Yeah, or Prof.
Or Prof, yeah. You know what? I don't believe that's real, but I'll take your word for it. We've just had a quick bite to eat. I know you said you liked the chicken, but do you remember what it was called?
No, broasted or something.
You actually do remember, yeah. It was a bee something broasted. The first time I've had that.
It must be baked and roasted. It's kind of a...
Oh my God. Yes. Yes, guys, is that what it is? Is it baked and roasted, broasted?
That's what broasted is.
Is you guys giving me the proper stuff? Yeah, this is like not decaffeinator, and because hold on, let me check. Yeah, that's all right. You know what would be nice with this? One of them Belvita biscuits. They normally do have them in the canteen, but I haven't seen any.
I only know hobnobs. I have no idea what Belvita means.
But I didn't know either. I mean, this is like a Safir TV thing. They have plenty of those. There's like chocolate filled ones. What do you mean? I finished them. I had one, bro. What are you talking about? I had one. Okay,
yeah.
We'll buy some more.
Write that one off.
Yeah, I don't know why we just like talking about food.
Yeah.
You said that you make a mean lamb roast.
I make a mean lamb roast.
Is it roasted?
No, it's not.
Oh, it's proper roasted.
Proper roast, yeah.
That rhymes.
All the trimmings. And then a bit of rosemary and mint jelly to go with it. Yeah.
Interesting. I just say, yeah, I can go for more.
Yeah.
I showed you my old photos, didn't I?
I did. Yes.
And you gave me a pat on the back.
I did see them and I congratulated you.
He gave me a pat on the back. He said, congratulations, you've done well.
Yeah.
And that was the highlight of my night.
Yeah.
When you come here, though, when you come to London, do you cook or do you just go to your local chicken cottage and just like junk food it out?
I only cook for myself. I would never cook for somebody else. I'm terrified of cooking for other people.
I get it. You don't want me to come over.
No, you're welcome.
Enough said.
As long as you don't say anything, you're welcome. But I cook very well for myself because I praise myself for whatever I cook. I think this is the best thing. But I'm worried about what other people might say. So in Rome, I cook for myself quite a lot.
Okay.
Because you don't want to be going out and getting takeaways all the time in Rome. You want to be able to do real stuff. And here in London, depending where I'm staying, I cook for myself, or there are meals on kind of part of the board lodging.
Do you and your mates get together? Because you said there's about 5-6 of you that actually live in the. Is it like a university or
in Rome?
In Rome, yeah.
Yeah.
So don't you guys get together like once a week or something?
No.
Cook?
We have lunch together every day. It's kind of tradition.
Okay.
And we have a wonderful Italian woman who cooks real Italian food for us.
Uh-huh.
So and then we look after ourselves for the rest of the time. So we don't get together because we kind of live together and we're always with each other. So that's enough.
I'm curious about your diet regime because you're very healthy, yet you said you don't do vegetables. So do you
vegetables.
Like twice a day, 3 meals, like standard? How many?
Not standard. No, in Italy, generally you eat twice a day because breakfast in Italy doesn't exist.
Oh.
So, it's coffee and a croissant or something.
Croissant.
But that's it. So generally twice a day, and generally in Italy I eat a meal at lunchtime, not in the evening, because in the evening you don't want to be eating too much.
So since I began my diet, right? So I do intermittent fasting. Well, I try to.
Yeah.
And that's sort of my success story.
Yeah.
Oh, speaking of fasting, do Catholics, Christians fast?
We do. We fast, Catholics particularly fast during the period called Lent, which is the 6 weeks leading up to Easter. So it's always the same time of the year, roughly March, April. It's not a rigorous fast. It's left to each individual to decide how they want to do it. So for some people it'll be more rigorous, others less rigorous. We basically leave it to people, because for us fasting is at least in part something sacrificial. It's meant to hurt a bit.
Okay.
And therefore we often say to people, you choose your own form of sacrifice. Maybe fasting is not an option because of health or for some other reason. If you're a mother with young children, you've got to be careful. People who are working long hours, they have to be careful. As Muslims living outside of an Islamic society, in a Western society, it's much more difficult for them because you don't have the same possibilities. So we allow people a certain space, but in fact people are meant to, every week Catholics are meant to, on at least one day of the week, do something sacrificial and in some way help the poor. This is the key.
So I take it Lent takes place at a certain period in time, period of the year. What?
It's usually the same time as the Jewish Passover, before the Jewish Passover. So it's the 6 weeks that lead up to Easter, and Easter is a kind of a movable festival in that it's not based on the Gregorian calendar. Easter, the date has never been established as the Gregorian date. So generally it's around the time of the Jewish Passover.
There's like 9 things that break a fast for the Muslims, roughly, depending on which marja, which Grand Ayatollah you follow. So according to Ayatollah Sistani, there's like 9 things. If you are fasting and you eat and drink, obviously that nullifies it. But if you also swear by God falsely, stuff like that. Does any of those sort of rules or conditions apply to a Lent fast?
Well, there's been a reinterpretation of fasting in the sense that some people have say, well, you could fast from food, but there are other things you could fast from, such as, unjust behavior or racial prejudice or whatever it is, the habit that's in your life that's wrong. You could try fasting from that, because often that's tougher than fasting from food. To break a bad habit really does take effort and willpower. And for some people, fasting from food might be much easier than breaking a habit of foul language or whatever it is.
Using profanity in every sentence almost. Even to emphasize something, but there's other ways to emphasize.
I'm kind of some of the recent movies that have come out, the latest James Bond and others. The use of the name of God is extraordinary. I just wonder how and why they have to use God's name so much.
Purposely done, I take it.
In such a profane way. Why would you need to do that?
Especially when you talk about movies and Hollywood level.
So
every word is counted for.
So some of the kind of movies I was really looking forward to, I won't on principle watch them because, if it was my mother's name, I wouldn't watch it. So if it's God's name, even more so. But it's a pity that people have gone into that.
Amazing. I like that. Father Christopher, you have dedicated a good portion of your life studying. You went into education, not just for your own self, but to learn and then regurgitate that back onto the masses, right? You do this time and time again. And you, as you say, you're a prof. Again, I don't believe that's a real word, but I'll go with it. What you do now, you travel across the globe, You deliver speeches, talks, and I think to myself, why? Why do you do that? I like to give an answer myself also. A, you do it because you're passionate about it. You like it. You actually enjoy it. If you didn't enjoy it, you would have stopped ages ago. And B, which is perhaps even more important, is that you feel that it adds value to people's lives. Or else, why are you doing it? Just for fun. It is fun, but you got to give something back. And you do that time and time again. You just regurgitate that back onto the masses. Could you tell me what Imam Hussain alayhi salam has given us? Virtues, contemporary, something we can relate to in this day and age.
Okay, so that for me is one of the keys of understanding any of these members of the Ahl Bayt, and especially the names we know well from the Karbala event, Lady Zainab, Zain al-Abidin, all of these, that they have to speak to contemporary lives. Our world has changed, as somebody said, but God's commands have not changed. Therefore, you have to find the ability to speak the same words of God, which are unchanging, into a changing and contemporary society, and find ways of not entertaining, but of getting people to listen.
Okay.
So you have to find ways of translating, So what's the key virtue in the life of Al-Hussein?
Yeah.
Because I think that of all the virtues, there's always one that's going to stand out as the top virtue. And I think that is the virtue of integrity.
Right.
In other words, I am in public what I am in private. If I say something, it's the thing I do, and I behave in the same way whether people are watching or not watching. Integrity, people with integrity are the people who sleep well at night because they don't lie awake wondering how to cover their tracks, wondering about how to cover up something they've done or not done. None of that worry. So if you want inner peace, not world peace, inner peace, you have to live with a certain measure of integrity. Because if not, your own conscience is going to keep wrestling with you and fighting with you.
Integrity.
And integrity basically means that I am a man of my word.
Right.
That you can stake your life on what I've said, that it's true, and that I'm going to be faithful to it and do it.
You know who else that reminds me of? And this is very contemporary, even though I've never met the guy, I've only seen him on TV, is Ayatollah Khomeini, right? The man who brought the revolution. Because that's what I've heard people say about numerous different sources as well. And it was shocking to see how they all say the same thing, that whatever he was in his house, in his private setting, he was that in public as well. This is why people said, do what you want to do. We are behind you.
That's integrity. And I think if you live with integrity, all the other virtues will slot into place.
Right.
Of course, because otherwise you're not living with integrity. If I live with integrity, it means I will also live with justice, with fairness, with kindness to those around me, and all the other virtues. The virtues are endless. So the thing that attracts me most about Al-Hussein, and I think the message that Al-Hussein has for a contemporary world, is that we need, whatever our faith. So you want to, in a sense, just step back from religion for a moment, because Al-Hussein can't be a universal model of anything if he is trapped in one faith family.
Very true.
So you have to, in a sense, release him and say there are certain virtues that are religious, but I think there are some virtues that are primarily human virtues.
Yeah, release as if he's under, for God forbid, our control or we own him. That's not the case at all. We pretend like we do. We tell people that we own him. I hate that word, but you know what I mean. Like, we've cocooned that message and him and his family as if we are the proud, owners of something like that.
So even if a non-believer, somebody who has no belief in God, somebody who's got no time for any sort of religion, organized or disorganized, if that person could find something in Al-Hussein that attracts, then you have a universal paradigm. And integrity is, I think, a human virtue, in that it's a virtue that is lived by religious and non-religious people alike. Now, deep down inside, I as a believer think that all virtues are religious because they are created by God. God places the capacity for virtue in
Everything
us.
good comes from God.
For God. However, for the sake of argument, virtue has to be practiced by believers in God and non-believers, because virtue shapes the human community.
Right.
If people live constantly with vice, the community is going to be an unhappy place. And we've got no shortage of examples. So if you want to present Al-Hussein to a contemporary audience, for me, you have to present him as a model of human integrity.
So on the basic level, for example, if Imam Hussain alayhi salam needed or wanted during Karbala, as it was transpiring just before Ashura, wanting water for his family members and the children, he's already demonstrated a few days before, as soon as he arrived on the land of Karbala, he fed his opposition, right? He gave down to the horses, the animals, water. So that's a living example of integrity. He's fair with each and every individual, right? There's an animal, needs water, feed. Doesn't matter if he's not a part of my horse stable, for example. We need to make sure, and yes, there are opposition. They're going to probably come and attack us very soon, but it's a requirement at that time, and he fulfilled each and every requirement.
Look, the whole of Karbala is a lesson of integrity, because Karbala happens because one man and those who stand with him decides that this is not how Islam should be. And having decided that, I realized that I have to take a stand. I can't just sit in my house and complain. And therefore, the whole of Karbala is primarily for me a lesson in human integrity. And I talk about, humans who have submitted themselves to God, but have not lost their humanity for that. They still have human fears, human doubts,
Sure.
all of that, but who have who have come to the conclusion that this is not how revelation wanted us to live.
Since you began your research and you were exploring Shia Islam, and then you were exploring these prominent figures within the Islamic world, for example, Imam Hussain, the one who we're speaking of, after studying him, did you perhaps increase or enhance your integrity because of him? Did you find more examples, perhaps, after reading about his story and say, you know what, I could implement this in my life? And did you perhaps implement something in your life?
Look, I think that is probably true, starting firstly with Lady Fatima, then with Lady Hussein, Lady Zainab, then with Al-Hussein, as I progressed in my studies, and now with Al-Abbas, that each of them has given me a certain impetus in a particular area of life. So Lady Fatima, for example, the fact is that even when you've come to the end of a long day and there are things that need to be done, you do them, no matter how exhausted you are, because it's the right thing to do.
Yes.
Lady Zainab, the courage to stand with people, even if it's a dangerous choice, that sometimes we have to stand with people, in her case with her brother, who didn't need her to speak for him, he could speak, but nonetheless she stood with him as a support. And sometimes, instead of, to quote a kind of slightly kitschy phrase, instead of just being there, simply being there, people say, oh, no, be there simply. In other words, without creating more fear, without creating more pain, but a familiar, supportive face. That's what Zainab teaches me, that some, the old philosophy, you can't help everybody who comes into your life, but at least don't hurt them.
Yes, that's a true statement.
That's it. That there are many people who are going to cross my path who I'll never be able to help, but I can stand with them.
Speaking of helping, and speaking of oppositions and enemies of Imam Hussain alayhi salam, again on the battlegrounds of Karbala, just before his martyrdom, again and again, and obviously I'm sure you've come across this, and correct me if I'm wrong, but he was speaking to his opposition. He was speaking to the army of Yazid, who was going to attack him and his family members just in a few moments' time. And he kept going till the last moments, kept delivering sermons and talks to them and trying to get into their heads and be like, what are you guys doing? That was showing love for just humanity. He didn't want them to be damned and doomed in this life and the hereafter. He genuinely cared for their future, their salvation, which they had none because they decided their fate. But he didn't give up. He kept going.
I think there's one particular moment where even Al-Hussein expresses utter shock and disbelief in human depravity, and that's the moment when they were threatening to burn the tents. Even Al-Hussein said, how could you even imagine doing such a thing?
When was this exactly? When Imam Hussain was injured?
This is towards the end, when they're threatening to set fire to the women's tents. They don't in the end set fire to them. But Al-Hussein himself is utterly shocked that an enemy would resort to such an horrendous thing to try and get him to finish this now and end it. And even, you get the impression as he speaks that even Al-Hussein is shocked that human beings could be so depraved that they would do a thing like that. But otherwise he's quite stoic. As you say, he keeps us this constant communication with God, because even at the end he prostrates in prayer, even as he's at the very end. But he keeps us this constant conversation with God. He keeps a constant line of communication with the women in the tents and the children, and he keeps a constant line of communication open with his enemies. As the great Archbishop Tutu said, enemies are just friends waiting to be made.
Enemies? Sorry, say that once
Enemies
again.
are just friends waiting to be made. Keep the lines of communication open, because Al-Hussein did that.
He did exactly that.
He didn't block off the possibility, and we have an example of the famous Hur in his moment of conversion, and you think, well, what persuaded that man to edge his horse? Even his companion said, "Is something wrong with you? What are you doing?" Because he was edging his horse and then he made a break for it.
Yeah.
Why would he do that?
Yeah.
He knew already what the outcome was going to be.
Yeah.
Well, it's because he recognized through that open communication that he was on the wrong side.
He recognized Imam Hussain alayhi salam's integrity.
Yeah, integrity, and that he was on the wrong side.
And he himself had that level.
Yeah.
He just needed to enhance it
Yeah.
once he attached himself to Imam Hussain.
See, that's what models do. Models
Right.
spur us into action. I look at a model like Hussein and I say, my life is not adding quality in this particular area, or I'm falling really low in this particular area. But I look at a man like Hussein or millions of other models and I say, these people spur me on to make a couple of tweaks here.
And look how nice he is. Obviously, as you said, the Pope, is it Pope Tutu? Archbishop
Tutu, yeah.
Archbishop
Yeah.
Tutu.
Yeah.
What he said, it's a really, really nice thing. Good comments he's made, and that's for people who are enemies of Imam Hussain. He's still trying to deliver that message to them, get them to come over, and we see examples of Hazrat Hur.
Yeah.
But his friends who are already in his camp, look how he's nice to them. That on the eve of Ashura, he tells them, guys, look, they're thirsty for my blood.
You
right?
can go.
You can go. He's actually trying his best to save their lives. So look, you'll still get the merits. I'll make sure you guys, pass through those channels and the Sirat, and you'll get the intercession. You're free to go.
And the first person to protest was Abbas. He said, don't even think about such a thing. How can you imagine we would do that? So all the brothers speak, but Abbas is the first to speak up. That we will never, ever abandon you. And it's
when two hearts are just they've given each other, they've given up, they've given themselves for Al-Hussein, for God, right, for that mission. There's nothing else to do. There's nothing else to ponder upon. And Father Chris, tell me how we in this day and age can implement, absorb what Imam Hussain stood for, his virtues, and how we can. You have any practical examples for us? I know we're speaking of integrity and just something practical. You know what's happening in this post-COVID world. How can we as individuals show more integrity, practice integrity, if that makes sense? What do you think?
It begins in our own homes, of course.
Sure.
So, the fact is that unlike Al-Hussein, who lived out his life and his martyrdom on a world stage, most of us don't live on a world stage. Most of us live our lives kind of privately. We mix with our own circle. And it's in those places that real virtue has to be lived. In our own relationships, in our own families, in our own homes, in our own place of work. I constantly have people coming to me, Catholics, saying, it's so difficult in the workplace. I hear people blaspheming, and I don't know whether I should say to them, please don't, or if I should just... It really is a hard challenge, and as we were saying, somebody said yesterday, you don't want to challenge people because you never know how they're going to react. But I hear people blaspheming and using the name of God in a horrible way, and I think, should I say to them, look, that's very offensive, or should I not? That's a huge moral choice to make, because it could involve...
There's going to be repercussions.
Yeah, repercussions.
Yeah, reputational damage could be anything.
I think each of us in our own private world has already enough scope to live out the virtues more perfectly, more intensely. And I like to think that there is a knock-on effect, that we inspire each other, that I look at somebody else and I think, wow, that guy really does that well. He's really, he's honest, for example. When he speaks that it's absolute truth, that he's not covering up anything. I like that virtue, and we do inspire each other.
And imagine if we were to befriend these types of individuals, and our circle of friends included many of these types of, it would automatically resonate onto us. We would mimic them, we'd copy them, and we'd become better ourselves.
Of course, if you mix with great, good, godly people, it rubs off eventually.
Absolutely. And the opposite is true as well.
The opposite is true as well.
Mingle with convicts.
If you mingle with, you're eventually going to take on their attributes. And that's just an easily provable reality. In fact, one of the passages in the Christian scriptures says, don't mix constantly with bad people. And there are surely plenty of hadith that say the same. Mix with godly people because their godliness rubs off onto you.
That's it. Father Chris, you inspire me.
Thank you.
So look what you're doing for a faith that's not even yours. You took the time out, dedicated your time, efforts, resources to write books, basically, right? So you've definitely inspired me, and I feel you obviously harbor, or you have integrity, and some of the other guys have noticed that as well. They were saying really good things behind your back. Normally that sentence doesn't go behind your back. Yeah, see how rare that is.
I'm already nervous.
Yeah, no. Obviously everybody's really happy you're here.
Look, we all of us, in a sense, unless there's something wrong with us, all of us want to live in a world that is better. All of us imagine a world, the world that God first created, that should have been and could have been. And therefore, I'm determined that dialogue, friendship, cooperation is a much better way than enmity. What's the point of enmity? What's the point of saying, oh, I've got Muslims living next door, or I've got Christians living next door, and I really don't. That's pointless. That's just creating little pools of animosity. And when people, I've got so many Shia friends now who feel quite comfortable in my presence as I do in theirs. We don't threaten each other. We don't have to compromise our faith. We all know what we believe.
Yeah.
And
we all like roasted chicken.
And we all hate Brussels sprouts. It's just universal.
That might be true.
Yeah, it's universal.
The guys are laughing in this.
The point is that we decide there is a better way, as did Al-Hussein. There is a better way of living, not this way, not the Yazidi model,
Yes.
the Husseini model. And in every faith family, God raises up men and women like Al-Hussein, without doubt, who are willing to give their lives, even sacrifice their own rights, so that the rights of others can be upheld and respected. That's an extraordinary thing.
Well said. I have nothing further to say on that, and I can just say your akhlaq, your manners are sublime.
Shukran.
So yeah, absolutely, it's the truth. I appreciate that. You earlier mentioned about Catholic people who adhere to the Catholic faith and how they perceive something as blasphemy, for example. I'm not going to talk about blasphemy, but the adherence of the Catholic faith as well as Christianity. This is what I've been wanting to ask you. First of all, what is the difference between? There's got to be a difference, or else everybody would be called Christians. It would just be one, Christianity. There's a difference between Shia, Sunni, Salafi, Sufi. There is a difference. So what is the difference between Catholicism? Please say it for me.
Catholicism.
This is why I chew gum, so I pretend like it's the gum that's messed me up, but
Well, it's
Sayyid
not,
Ali's taking
actually.
it all. Look, he's chewing away. So what is the difference?
Well, in the same manner that all Muslims are called Muslims, there are some who are Shia, some who are Sunni. In the same way, all Christians are called Christians. There are some who are Catholic and some who are Protestant. And the Protestant family of Christianity is that family that broke away at the time of Martin Luther, John Calvin, King Henry VIII in this country,
Sure.
when there was a breakaway from the Church of Rome, the Roman Catholic Church, and these new churches began to be established, Lutheran, but Protestant. So basically, all Christians believe the same creed we have as in Islam. The creed is the creed. It's hard to the pillars of Islam are the pillars of Islam. And I know in Shia Islam there are a number of duties and pillars that are different, but nonetheless, generally we all believe the same thing. You all have to believe in Tawheed, for example. You all have to believe
Yes.
in Nubuwwah. You have to believe in the prophecy of Muhammad. That's not an option.
And as the last prophet as
Yeah,
well.
and as
obviously.
if you want to be called Muslim.
Yes.
But for example, you as a Shia, there are certain elements of Shia faith. For example, and this is a simple example, that the power of intercession, whereas in Sunni Islam that's not so well held.
Sure.
The point being that the matters that are crucial are held in common.
I have a Catholic friend, and he's told me something which I'm going to get you to validate. I could be totally wrong here, but why not take advantage of a Catholic priest who knows exactly what he's talking about? Christmas. So
Yeah.
I heard from my mate who's a Catholic, who follows the Catholic religion, that Catholic people, the community, does not celebrate Christmas on that universal day of Christmas, which is 25th of December. They actually feel that Jesus was born on a different date and time. Am I right and wrong? Did he kind of misconstrue something there? Or am I saying it incorrectly?
No, I think your friend may have misconstrued. We don't know the date of Jesus' birth. Nobody does.
Okay, not even like majority of the Christians?
Nobody does.
Nobody does,
Not
okay.
even the vaguest idea. And so the 25th of December, which was originally a pagan holiday or a pagan festival, was taken over by the Christians, Christianized, and said, okay, this time every year we will celebrate the birth of Jesus. So it's not, the question is not that he was born on the 25th of December. That's not the issue. The issue is that a date was chosen early on in the church and established as this is the day once a year when we will celebrate his birth.
Okay.
This once pagan festival will now become a truly
religious
Christian festival.
Christian festival.
Yeah, so it's that.
So I kid you not. I mean, I could be me in my memory because this was some time ago that he said this, but he said sometime in January is when they actually commemorate or celebrate.
So in Europe, in Italy, in Spain, in most of the Mediterranean countries, on the 6th of January is the Feast of Epiphany, which is the recollection of the three wise men who arrive. They were Persians, almost certainly. These three Persians arrive at the crib and bring gifts. So Epiphany in many countries is even bigger than Christmas. One of the reasons I go back to Rome on the 5th is I really like to be there for the 6th, because it's just like having Christmas all over again.
That's probably what he was trying to say.
Yeah.
And you're right, he's
massive.
European.
It's massive, it's
Yeah.
massive. So the famous story of the three wise men, the Persian stargazers who see the star and they follow it and they come to the crib, that's celebrated every year on the 6th of January. And in Europe, that's a really big festival.
What's that called?
Epiphany.
Epiphany.
Yeah.
Oh, like you have an epiphany.
Exactly. Which means a revelation.
A revelation.
Yeah.
Interesting. So I was kind of right.
Kind of right.
Kind
yeah,
of right.
Okay.
Okay.
Don't push it.
Which leads me on to this sort of next topic, which is also equally as important. You know, it's so information to get your information correct. You know, there's so much disinformation, misinformation out there. And it is ultimately the responsibility of the individual. But then again, when you have leaders within the community, within organizations, within universities and all these institutions, they sometimes falter. They sometimes are lazy. They sometimes just don't care. And guess what the result is? Misinformation going out to the masses. And then they build these weird concepts and ideas based on this limited knowledge. How important is it? Well, obviously it's very important, but how did the Ahlul Bayt, alayhim salam, preserve the original authentic message of Islam as Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, brought it down? Not brought it down, but delivered it to us as the archangel Gabriel gave it to him. That message, how important is it for the Ahlul Bayt to do it? And how have they done that? How did they play this impactful role?
Okay, by integrity, of course.
Of course.
That is the whole point, that the integrity of the Ahlul Bayt means that let's call it the deposit of faith, the revelation, whatever what you want to call it, that has been placed within them is protected, is nurtured. In other words, it's correctly interpreted and explained. So it starts, I mean, this is a Shia principle anyway, that you know well that if God is going to reveal himself or something about himself to us, or something about ourselves, or something about how to end our days in paradise. If God is going to say anything at all, then logically and rationally, God is going to make sure that that does not become distorted. We have to believe that.
This is why there's verses in the Quran which God says himself that I will protect.
Yeah.
The wording, the message,
Absolutely.
everything.
So this is just logical. You know, if you give to humanity, and let's say if you give to humanity a really important message, you have to create a structure to make sure that your message doesn't become distorted. Because if you line 10 people up and you whisper your message to the first one and invite them to pass it on, I guarantee at the end it'll be slightly different.
That's so logical.
Yeah.
Why can't we figure this out? Because Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he painstakingly went through all that he went through so that he can deliver this message as it was delivered to him, untouched, unadulterated, etc. And why would he not take the efforts to make sure that it stays that way?
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
I'll give you a very basic and simple example. We're recording here. There's memory cards that go here. They've backed them up as we're speaking. Just in case if something was to go wrong, at least we have the original footage. We can always tweak it later. Something so small but so logical, and yet we're talking about a religion that is meant for salvation.
Although it is more than that, obviously, as you know, it's more than just backup. So it's got to be
Protection.
Once you decide we've got to protect this message, preserve its integrity, preserve it whole, you've then got to decide, well, who can do that?
Yes, absolutely.
Not everyone can, and therefore the person who is appointed as that's a mechanism, if you like. The revelation is given, and then God creates or ordains a mechanism by which that revelation is going to be kept safe, and that must be imama. Can't be anything else.
Yeah, all the rules and regulations that have been passed down through the Prophet, and
Yeah.
now the Prophet, for example, is going to choose am I going to give this or hand this over to somebody who will be interpreting it without my help because won't be in this world anymore? Do I give it to somebody who's just become Muslim a few weeks ago? Or do I give it to somebody who's a Muslim from day one and has been by my side and actually understood me and hasn't quarreled with me and hasn't, etc., etc.? So yeah, it's so logical.
And even again, you can go a little deeper and say, do I give this to the person whom God has ordained? Quite clearly it should go to, because we have to believe that this nas, this handing over of authority in the imama, that this is ordained by God. It's not just that the imam thinks, who can I choose now? That's not at all. It's all divinely ordained, and therefore it's not just who do I most trust, but who has God appointed to be the next.
So, Father Christopher, let me ask you now, you've obviously highlighted integrity as the key thing here and how to preserve Islam. And there's different styles of leadership and different styles of preservation. So if I can ask you how you feel, you kind of already alluded to this, the Shia worldview, the school of thought, where it's imama. How about the other denominations of Islam? How about the other non-Shia schools of thought? How have they tried their best, for example, to preserve their perspective of Islam?
Well, of course, I mean, that's an interesting question, but in a sense it's null and void, because the issue isn't just the style of leadership, it's the nature of the leader.
Right.
So that makes all the difference, that the style of leadership could be democratic or it could be dictatorial. That's not the point. The point is that the nature of the leader, that this person has the ability, the God-given ability, to preserve, to explain, and to guard the revelation. So that's already a substantial issue.
Continuous form, in a continuous method.
And what we would call in Christianity an apostolic succession.
Ooh.
In other words, it's passed down from one to the next.
Apostolic.
Unbroken.
So coming with the word apostle.
Yeah,
apostolic,
which means messenger.
succession.
But
right.
it's an unbroken handing down. It has to be unbroken. So in the imama, that's exactly what you have. An unbroken handing on until the 12th the 12th imam and the ghaiba, of course.
Do you believe in the 12th Imam? Do you believe he's in ghaiba, his occultation? From your studies?
Look, as a believing Christian who holds on to similar beliefs, it's an easy concept for me to grasp and believe.
I was hoping you'd say that.
It's not a difficult concept. You know that the idea of the hidden Imam who continues to guide, because in Christianity you have this concept of the Holy Spirit who is sent to guide the church. The Holy Spirit is invisible and not seen in the results of, but it's an invisible presence that guides and protects the church and the revelation that the church carries. So for Catholicism and for Shia Islam, it's a logical thing that there has to be a central authority, an authority that is God ordained to protect the revelation from becoming distorted or badly interpreted or misinterpreted, whatever word you want to use.
Could I just confirm my understanding? I could be wrong here. So is it in Catholicism that Jesus, Hazrat Isa alayhi salam, was crucified? So he's actually passed away. He's gone back to his Lord. So death, he's gone through that death process. Okay. But in Islam, he was risen up to the sky. So that is a key difference there.
Yeah.
Okay. Just making sure, because you could obviously tell the other Muslims out there, say, look, concept of the Mahdi, it's not that far-fetched, because there's a prophet of yours who's gone through something similar way before Mahdi was even born.
Well, the concept of Al-Mahdi exists in all schools of Islam. It's just the nature of the Al-Mahdi that's different. You know, for one branch of Islam, the Al-Mahdi is already known. He's identified. For another branch, he's not yet
unknown,
raised up.
Yes.
So the idea of that does exist, but it's this concept of protecting what I call the deposit of faith, whatever it is that God has given. Whether for Muslims it's the Quran, for Christians the Bible, whatever God has given as revelation has to be protected and safeguarded from. Because we see what happens when people read the text wrongly.
Absolutely.
So I would suggest, and this is something I heard from a Muslim theologian years ago, the text is only as moral as the one reading it. If you are an angry person reading the Quran, you will read it in an angry way and you will interpret it in an angry way.
Haven't we seen that time and time again on the news medias and all these countries?
This is the problem. So the text has to be protected from all of these misreadings of what God actually meant or said, as opposed to what I like to think God meant or said. this is a very serious issue.
Very, very serious
In
issue.
all religions, because sacred text, it's an amazing thing for me that if you ask any child at school, your own children one day, when they're doing Shakespeare or whatever they do at school, none of them is going to just interpret Shakespeare for themselves. Oh, I think this is what Shakespeare meant. They all go off and they buy a guide.
Right.
Most people can't go to the local, wherever it is you go, and buy a do-it-yourself piece of furniture and put it together because they just have no idea how to read the instructions.
IKEA, yeah.
Okay, I didn't want to mention the brand. You went ahead and mentioned
it doesn't matter.
Okay, IKEA.
Yeah.
But people pick up sacred texts and read them and think they know what they mean. How is that? How is that?
That is maybe, what I really like what you said about the Shia faith and the process of, for example, how Ahlul Bayt preserve Islam is that there's a steady stream of hadayah, of guidance, all the way up to the awaited Savior.
An unbroken stream.
And that's key.
That's key.
And that's rare.
Yeah.